I'm Mike Waring, alias the Falcon. There's one thing you learn working for Uncle Sam. You can't beat him. But you'd be surprised at the number of people who try. Bootlegging is a crime against the United States government. But the repeal of the 18th Amendment did not spell the end of the bootlegger. Even today, there are thousands of illicit distilleries ranging in size from the small mountain stills to multi-million-dollar operations. And when there's enough evidence against them, it's my job to put them out of business.
Well, it's about time.
You sound like a wife.
Surprised?
Frankly, no.
Maybe I ought to introduce myself.
You needn't bother. I know who you are. You're Dutch Schneider of the Schneider Chemical Company. How come you're walking around like a citizen?
Oh, I'm out on bail.
Loose laws.
I just dropped by to remind you that your boys must have done $100 grand worth of damage when you knocked off my plant today.
Yeah, well, not nearly enough.
You know who's going to repay me for that?
No, who?
You.
Oh, my salary? Don't be silly. You should have paid the tax on that whiskey, Dutch. Uncle Sam doesn't like to be cheated.
Neither do I. That's why I have a lawyer named Arthur Hall.
Oh, now I'm beginning to get it. You hired Arthur Hall as a fixer. Well, that's pretty stupid for an old campaigner like you, Dutch.
What are you talking about?
I'll bet he sold you a bill of goods that he could keep us out of your hair as long as you paid off to him.
Well?
He was kidding you. He's got as much influence with my department as a man on the moon.
He told me he was paying you 5 bills a week.
He was lying to you.
What's so amusing? If Hall was lying, why weren't we knocked off before?
Because you were just lucky. We were understaffed and didn't get around to you. I can't get over the idea of Arthur Hall clipping a hep character like you, Dutch.
Yes, it is funny. But do you mind if I don't laugh? Right now, the joke seems to be on me. Don't bother. I can find my way out.
Oh, go ahead. You found your way in.
You're late, Arthur.
Oh, I was detained at the office, Peggy.
Dutch Snyder's been trying to reach you.
Yeah? What'd he say?
It wasn't what he said, darling. It was the way he said it.
Peggy, I'm going to have to leave town for a few days. I'm going to Los Angeles.
Oh, then that explains it.
That explains what?
Why the airline called and okayed your reservations to St. Louis.
Well, they just made a mistake, that's all.
Obviously. Well, have fun, darling. If there's anything I can do for you
As
here.
a matter of fact, there is. I want you to sign this paper.
What is this?
It's nothing of concern. Just sign this line
No.
first.
Didn't you tell me never to sign anything until I read it? This is to acknowledge that I, Peggy Hall, who...
Now, look, Peggy.
Why, Arthur, I'm shocked. Completely shocked. I couldn't sign a thing like this. If I did, all the money and bonds you've put in my name would revert back to you.
Well, it's my money in bonds, isn't it?
Of course, don't misunderstand me. I wouldn't want to see you penniless in St. Louis. Pardon me, Los Angeles. So suppose I write you a check for 20...
Look, Peggy.
Don't argue. I think I'm being very generous. After all, I'm not obliged to give you anything.
You little double-crosser. What do you think you're doing?
That's not nice, Arthur. Not nice at all.
Hello, Peggy. What are you doing here?
Oh, I've got a couple of things I want to take up with you. Would you mind leaving us alone for a little while, Peggy?
It'd be a pleasure.
Peggy, don't go. Don't go.
That's a swell girl you've got there, Arthur.
Listen, Dutch, I know what you're going to say.
Good. Then I don't have to say it.
There was a slip-up. I've been on the phone all day long. Those boys had no right to raid your place.
But they did.
Well, I got an appointment to talk to Mike Waring tomorrow.
I don't see how you'll be able to manage it.
Tom?
You Georgie Count? I'm Arthur Hall. I spoke to you on the phone about an hour ago.
I'll be with you in a minute.
Look, Kelk, I'm a very busy man.
Look, if you're in a hurry, you can take your business elsewhere.
I'll wait.
That's better. Pretty, isn't it? You know what's responsible for most of the trouble in the world? People put the wrong value on things. Take music, for example. That's important. Because it's the common denominator.
Look, Kelk, I didn't come here for a lecture.
There's no extra charge. What's on your mind?
You, want to do a job for me?
Not particularly. I'm a craftsman. I only do the jobs I like.
I'll pay you $500.
You're not even in my register. You'll have to go higher.
1,000.
You got the money on you?
Yeah, it is.
That's enough for me. 2, 4, 6, 8, 1,000. What's the name of your party?
Dutch Schneider. You know him?
Yeah, only by reputation. See the guy that pushed you around?
That's my business.
Well, you take care of your business. I'll take care of mine. Are you Dutch Snyder?
That's right.
Kelk's my name. George Kelk.
Haven't I heard that name before?
I don't know. I may have a business card.
I think I placed the name now.
Sit down.
You mind if I smoke?
Try my brand.
Well, if nothing else, it will give me a little more time. Have you got a match?
Yeah.
You know, I'm a little disappointed in myself.
You shouldn't be. Happens all the time.
You mind talking?
No, not at all. I got low managed. What's this, hideaway?
Yeah.
Not bad. Not bad at all. Do you like the way Rubenstein plays this?
Oh, I think he's the greatest.
I'm inclined to agree with you. There's no one who can touch him when it comes to execution.
Well, you ought to know. Isn't that your department?
Hey, that's all right. Say, tell me something, Dutch. Why is it the nice guys always get it?
Well, there's no reason they should. Look, Kelk, I don't want to insult you, but couldn't we talk this over? I know who put you up to it. It was Arthur Hall.
What difference does that make?
A lot. You and Hall have nothing in common. Wouldn't you rather work for me?
Definitely. But it's too late now.
Why? You can't tell me you're afraid of Hall. I don't know what he gave you, but I'll pay you $10,000 for that gun.
I don't know. I never did anything like this before. And if I should do it now, I wouldn't want you to think the money you're offering would have any effect upon my decision.
Of course not.
But you know, there was something about that fellow Hall that just rubbed me the wrong way. All right, Dutch. Get the dough.
I guess this is all you'll have to know about me.
Glad to meet you, Sergeant. Sit down. Well, it's a little late for socializing, so I guess you have a reason. What's on your mind?
You know a man by the name of Arthur Hall?
I know of him.
I understand you two are kind of friendly.
From what do you understand that?
Well, I didn't think Hall would loan $500 a week to someone he disliked.
What are you babbling about?
Well, I'm just trying to put a happy construction on it. Someone else might think he was trying to bribe you.
Would you give me that again, please?
According to the records we found in his apartment, Hall was paying you $500 a week.
That's a lie.
I'm only telling you how it might look to someone else.
Wait till I get my hands on Mr. Hall.
Sure you haven't already? Someone took a couple of shots at him early tonight.
Are you accusing me?
Well, and mind you, I said if Hall was bribing you, naturally you wouldn't like the story to get out.
What is this, a pinch?
Well, where did you get that idea? I just dropped by to make your acquaintance.
All right, you've made it. Now, if you don't mind, I've got a little work to do.
All right. Don't work too hard.
I watched Sergeant Harris leave with mixed emotions. I say mixed because I couldn't decide whether to slug him with my desk lamp or a coffee pot. As soon as he left, I hopped a cab for Arthur Hall's apartment. I don't know what I expected to find, but what I got was a very attractive widow.
I wish there were some way I could help you, Mr. Waring, but I knew so little of my husband's business.
Well, you certainly knew enough to tell the police that he kept me on his private payroll for $500 a week.
I didn't say that. I just gave them Arthur's records.
Those were phonies. He just kept them to impress Dutch Schneider.
Well, now, why would he do that?
I'm asking you.
Well, I think that's a question you might ask Mr. Schneider.
Look, Mrs. Hall, you don't seem to understand. I'm in a tough spot. The cops might think I killed your husband just to keep him from talking.
Well, they'll never get me to believe that.
Oh, thanks a lot.
However, I don't suppose they'll allow me to serve on the jury. So good night, Mr. Waring. Drop in again sometime.
Hiya, Dutch. Oh, it's Georgie. You're the last person I expected to see tonight. It's a funny thing, Dutch. I've known you how long? Maybe 24 hours. And yet I feel there's a bond between us.
Well, thanks, Georgie.
You know me better than I know myself. I used to think I was incorruptible. I'm serious. I always prided myself that when I took an assignment, nothing could swerve me from my purpose. But you did. Didn't you, Dutch? And you did it with money.
Did I do that?
Yeah. You put ideas into my head. What I'm trying to say is that suddenly money has become tremendously important to me.
Really?
Really. And I want lots of it.
What do I look like? Fort Knox?
A reasonable facsimile. Last night at 9 o'clock, I sold you your life for $10,000. That was pretty cheap, Dutch. I'll bet you would have paid 5 times that.
Definitely.
Well, I want it now.
Otherwise?
Otherwise, I'll go to a fellow named Mike Waring.
Oh, you wouldn't do that.
Why not?
I just don't think you would.
You're wrong, Dutch.
How can I be? You admit I know you better than you do yourself, and I just don't see you going to Mike Waring. No, I just don't see it. But apparently Dutch Schneider wasn't the fine judge of character he thought. For 12 hours later, I received a call from Mr. Kelk. Yeah. He introduced himself by asking if I was interested in locating Arthur Hall's killer. When I allowed I was, he said he'd be by at 6:30. I spent the next half hour getting prepared for my guest. I had a feeling that this might be a memorable interview, so I thought the results should be faithfully recorded for posterity.
Well, that's the story, Waring, from start to Arthur Hall's finish.
Let's see if we understand each other, Mr. Kelk.
I think we do now.
You'd be willing to tell that story to my superiors?
Why not?
You admit, then, that Arthur Hall hired you to kill Dutch Snyder?
Nothing happened to Dutch, did it?
No.
Then what can happen to me?
It's pretty logical thinking. But what do you think Dutch's reaction will be when he finds out you've been up here?
I'm not afraid. I can look out for myself. Want me to, prove it? Pretty cute. Let's have a little playback. Well, that's the story, Waring, from start to Arthur Hall's finish.
Let's see if we understand each other, Mr. Kelk.
I think we do now.
You'd be willing to repeat that story to my superiors?
Why not?
You admit, then, that you were hired by Arthur Hall to kill Dutch Snyder?
Well, nothing happened to Dutch, did it?
No.
Then what can happen to me?
How did you peg it?
You're talking with a guy who keeps up with the latest in the field. I do a little home recording myself.
I ought to be ashamed.
Turn around. Start walking. Get in there. Next time, remember you're not dealing with an amateur. I never audition for free.
Mr. Kelk, I wonder if you could spare me a few minutes. I'm Peggy Hall.
Arthur Hall?
Arthur Hall's widow. I suppose you wonder what I'm doing here.
I imagine you'll tell me.
You're not much of a gentleman.
I never claimed I was. All right, Mrs. Hall. What's on your mind?
Well, you were a pretty good friend of my husband's, weren't you?
I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't either. That wasn't very nice of you to take his money and then sell him out.
What do you mean by the crack I sold him out?
You agreed to, shall we say, take care of Dutch.
Who told you that?
Mr. Kelk, there are very few things about my husband, dead or alive, that I don't know.
Are you trying to say I killed him?
Oh, of course not. How could you possibly kill Arthur when I did? I think I did a real professional job, don't you? Especially when you realize that just a week ago, I had no idea how one of these things works.
Oh, it's real simple.
And so I discovered. I wouldn't do that. Would you mind backing up? I see you have one of these, too.
All right, Mrs. Hall. I give up. What's the gag?
Well, ever since poor Arthur's murder, I've been harassed by the police and a gentleman named Mike Waring. I don't think they're going to stop until the case is solved.
Well, how do I fit in the picture?
Well, if you were to confess that Dutch Snyder hired you to kill my husband, I think it'd solve everything.
Oh, sure. You want me to call Waring now?
Would you?
Be a pleasure.
What would you tell him?
Well, you write the lyrics and I'll sing the song.
Well, suppose you say that you killed my husband acting on Dutch Snyder's instructions, and now your conscience is troubling you.
Anything else?
No, that'll be sufficient. Well, go on.
You must be nuts.
The number is Plaza 8, 1098.
Oh. You're prepared for everything, aren't you?
Oh, would you mind holding the phone away from your ear so I can hear what's going on?
Yeah,
Waring?
that's right.
George Kelk.
Why, you dirty...
I'll tell you why I called. I wanted you to know I bumped off Arthur Hall.
You what?
Dutch Snyder hired me for the occasion.
Why tell me?
Well, let's just say my conscience bothers me and I can't sleep nights.
Now, look, Kelk, what are you trying to do?
Satisfied?
Mr. Kelk, you did beautifully. I can't tell you how grateful I am.
Well, don't try. Now, do me a favor. Get out of here.
Well, that poses a problem. I'm sure Mr. Waring will be by to follow this thing up, and naturally, I'd be a little embarrassed if you should give him another story.
Would I do that to a lady?
Well, I'm afraid I can't afford to gamble. I think it'd be better for all concerned if he found you dead. Well, wouldn't it be logical for a man whose conscience was troubling him to commit suicide?
Sorry, I can't oblige.
I wouldn't think of troubling you. I'm sure if your fingerprints are found on the gun, it'll all add up.
Oh, so help me, you are nuts.
Why? Is there something wrong with my theory?
You'd never get away with it.
I'll bet you've heard that line a dozen times in your career. It never stopped you.
Listen.
I'm sorry, but I'm a little pressed for time. Mr. Waring will be here any minute. Oh, and thanks for everything, too.
Mrs. Hall.
There was a gathering of the clan in Kelk's apartment. Sergeant Harris was master of ceremonies. I had phoned him right after I heard from Kelk.
Well, I guess this ties it all up in a neat little package.
Does it?
Yeah, but you claim he told you he was hired by Dutch Snyder to bump Arthur Hall.
Then why would he confess?
Like you said, his conscience was bothering him.
Ha! This boy Kelk was born without a conscience.
No. This is suicide, all right. This is the same gun he used on Hall.
What about Prince?
Take a look for yourself.
All these belong to Kelk?
Well, here's a set we took off the body.
Well, if you've compared them, I guess they match.
You notice how sharp the prints are on the gun?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going over and pick up Dutch. You want to tag along?
No, thanks. I think I'll run over and console the widow.
Mrs. Hall?
Yeah, I think she might be interested to know that her husband's murder was solved. She might even appreciate it.
I can't tell you how grateful I am you stopped by, Mr. Waring.
No, it was my pleasure. You never met Kelk, did you?
No.
Well, I did. And he certainly didn't strike me as a guy that would commit suicide.
Well, we have to face facts. He is dead.
Oh, definitely.
And you said he telephoned you beforehand.
Yeah. But just for the sake of argument, suppose someone forced him to do it.
Well, how could they do that?
Simplest thing in the world, shove a gun in his back.
Well, what would be the point?
Well, it'd frame Dutch Snyder and give the real killer an out. Then after Kelk made his phony confession, our mysterious assailant shot him.
But aren't you forgetting something? Mr. Kelk committed suicide.
Who says so?
You did. You said his fingerprints were on the gun.
Yeah, that's right. But there's something funny about that. I was in Kelk's room trying to figure it out when Sergeant Harris came over to me. I remember him showing me the gun. He said there was no question about it being the same weapon used on your husband. And then I asked about the fingerprints, and the sergeant let me see for myself. The prints found on the gun were every bit as sharp as those that the police took off Kelk's body. You couldn't ask for a more perfect set of prints.
So?
So that's just the trouble. They shouldn't have been so perfect. The gun was a .38 automatic, and a .38 automatic has the kick of a Notre Dame quarterback.
Mr. Waring, what are you driving at?
Well, if Kelk had committed suicide, the prints on the gun would have been smudged. Obviously, somebody put that gun in his hand after he was dead.
You're not insinuating that
Well, it's illogical that Dutch Snyder would frame himself now, isn't it?
That's very funny. Stop it. Give me that gun.
Why, Mrs. Hall, what did you do, trade guns with Kelk? I'll bet the prints on this one will be smudged.
Let go of me.
Don't be silly. This is the part of my work I like most.
I'll kill you for this.
I know how you feel, Angel. But you've had your quota for one day. Maybe you can get around to me next week. Now, you just relax. You're going places.